Afternoon. I think on various occasions, all three of us have talked about the fact that we've got really cool jobs. We love what we do for a living. We get to talk about sports for a living, and we genuinely look forward to coming to work every day because 15 weeks or 15 hours out of the week, we get to talk about sports. And the lion's share of that is about sports right here in the state of Mississippi. Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Southern Miss, the SEC, things that matter here to people in the state of Mississippi. But there are occasionally days where maybe we look a little less forward to opening the mics because we're not sure exactly what to say and we're not sure exactly how to say it. And this is one of those days. For the last 18 hours or so, many in the state of Mississippi have been consumed by the news or the lack of news as it pertains to Mike Leach, the head football coach at Mississippi State. I find it very hard to believe that any of you listening at this point have not heard at least something about this. I think the most recent update we have is that Mike Leach is in critical condition at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson after a serious health issue that occurred in his home overnight, Saturday night into Sunday morning. He was taken initially to Oktibbeha County Hospital and was then later transported to Jackson and UMMC. It does not feel right or appropriate for us to speculate about his condition. There's plenty of news out there. There are updates, a couple of them official updates from Mississippi State that basically say when there is more information available, the university or the family will make that information known. But there is enough reporting and there is enough, I think, credible information that we can all agree that the current situation for Mike Leach is extremely critical. And there has been a steady request for prayers for the family, for the doctors and the nurses involved in his care, and for Coach Leach himself. Late last night, Brian Haydad did a special edition, shorter version than normal of Thunder and Lightning. He was by himself. If you have not listened to that, I would encourage you to do so. It's about 25 minutes, and it's a little raw, but it was, I thought, extremely respectful and extremely well done. And, hey, Dad, with that, I feel like I should kind of open it up to you. This conversation will go, I'm sure, a lot of different directions throughout the course of this afternoon. Suffice it to say, it has been a difficult 24 to 36 hours for the Leach family, for friends, co-workers, acquaintances, and for the larger Mississippi State family, and frankly, for the larger college football family, as tributes to Mike Leach have been pouring out via social media channels and interviews throughout the course of the day.
Yeah, it was about this time yesterday that everything started to break as far as, the early details of what was going on with Mike Leach. And unfortunately, every update that I've gotten there that Mississippi State has released or anything, it has not been positive. And it feels like we're trending in the wrong direction there. So that being said, it's been a very surreal few days for me. When you consider, and I've tweeted about this and talked about it on the podcast, Richard, I sent you a text from I had my annual Christmas party on Saturday night, and I was able to surprise my guests with Mike Leach coming in. I talked to him on Monday and see if he would be able to join us, and we got a little bit back and forth because I knew they were recruiting this weekend. But he found a window to come over. He and his son came over and spent about an hour with my family and friends, and he couldn't have been in better spirits. He was laughing, joking, eating, talking, taking pictures. And when he left, he was like, "Brian, next year, let's do this after signing day so I can stay the whole night." I was like, "We'll see what we can do for you, Coach." And shook his hand, and he left. And, didn't think anything of it. And then, about 2:30 yesterday afternoon, I got a text alerting me that something was going on, that he had missed practice, that he had missed a meeting, and that they thought something was wrong. They were having a team meeting at that moment to try to explain what was happening, and then it just sort of went from there. That you got the news he had been sick and been admitted to the hospital, and they were trying to get him down to Jackson, and it's just gone from there. I feel bad that we don't have any real updates. It's very possible that during the course of this show we will get updates, and we will certainly pass those along as we get them. But what you said just a minute ago, the only real thing that people can do right now is, if you're the praying type, just to pray, and if you're not, to do whatever it is that brings you peace or brings you answers. But that's kind of where we are right now with Mike Leach.
There's been a lot that has been written and a lot that has been said. And I've read a lot of it, and I know you guys have as well. I thought maybe the most measured thing that had been written by someone who clearly knew Mike Leach from his time at Washington State was written by John Canzano. You can read that at his website, John Canzano, CANZANO.com. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but I will read the first few paragraphs. He wrote, Mike Leach had trouble sleeping late Saturday night. Before he drifted off on the sofa at his home in Mississippi, he sent some text messages to friends. Leach is 61. He's now in critical condition at the University of Mississippi Medical Center. He was airlifted there Sunday. It's been reported that the Mississippi State football coach suffered a massive heart attack. That may or may not be true. His family isn't even certain of that yet, I'm told. But I do know that Leach has been suffering from heart failure for a while. Fluid around his heart, fluid around his lungs. He's battled pneumonia this season, too. You may have noticed Leach has had a persistent hacking cough. I'm told that Leach didn't exactly collapse at his home, as some reported. He's not dead, as others have indicated on social media. The football coach was found on the sofa, unresponsive, after what some think was 10 to 15 minutes. EMTs showed up and did their jobs. Doctors then worked all day Sunday to sedate Leach, stabilize him, and are now beginning to assess his condition. Does it sound bad? Very much so. But as one member of his inner circle said late Sunday night, he's still with us. From there, he goes on to talk about his experiences with Mike Leach and kind of some of the quirkiness, some of the intricacies of his personality, some of his interaction. But I thought in summation of what had happened, that is written in a way that makes me believe that John Canzano has talked with people either in his family or close to his family. And I think it summarizes right that something is very, very wrong. And we don't know exactly what that something is, but it's very serious. And all the speculation in the world on social media doesn't really matter. Orky, this one's tough. We talked about it this morning. I know you and Haydad have been in contact. You and I have been in contact. Haydad and I, we've and there's no roadmap for how to spend 3 hours on the radio talking about a man who is still alive, but is in very, very critical condition.
Yeah, I've had people ask me throughout the day, how do you guys approach this? And my answer was, I don't know. I don't know. I used this word earlier today, unfortunate. It's such a terrible adjective because it doesn't come anywhere close to adequately describing the situation that this is. But what you saw in what was, I don't know if jarring is the right word, but you forget sometimes how influential he was in college football. When you've got head coach after head coach, like wildly successful head coach that credits all of their success back to Mike Leach, the tentacles that he had in college football to this day and years and years and years from now, it's hard to believe how influential he was on this sport. And you're seeing that with just the outpouring love that people have posted. I forgot how influential he was on the sport until the last day or so.
And I think that's one thing we'll do this afternoon. We'll talk a little bit about Mike Leach, the football coach, and maybe talk a little bit about Mike Leach off the field, and perhaps even hear some of the interviews and some of the stories that he has told along. We welcome you to the program if you're just joining us. Obviously, much of the conversation this afternoon will center around Mike Leach, which is interesting because a week ago, 6 days ago, we said a lot of the conversation today is going to center around Mike Leach, but it was for altogether different reasons. It had to do with on-the-field stuff and transfer portal and recruiting and relationships with players and all of those things. And today it's about a man who is fighting for his life, and it is an extremely uphill battle as we come to you on this 12th of December. Richard Cross, Brian Haydad, Michael Borkey in the Pearl River Resort studios. Visit pearlriverresort.com. Hey, Dad, you mentioned a second ago the Christmas party from Saturday night. You invited me, and I was thankful for that. Unable to come, was with my son on Saturday night with mom and sisters out of town, and that was great. And I appreciated very much the invitation. You didn't tell me Mike Leach was going to be there. I don't know if that would have changed anything or not. Maybe Obi and I would have made a road trip.
I would have skipped my anniversary dinner.
No, you wouldn't have.
No, you wouldn't.
I would have thought about it. I mean,
yeah, I had two of the big three there. I had Lamonis was there too.
Really? Very cool. Yeah. And I think Chris Jans was probably in Minnesota, so
Yeah, otherwise he would have been there. I would have invited him for sure.
He sends his apologies.
He was Shooter McGavin. I was too busy winning.
Yeah, exactly.
We will get into some sports stuff throughout the course of the afternoon. Mississippi State had another win in basketball, a quite impressive win on the road last night in Minneapolis against the University of Minnesota. Ole Miss got a win against Valparaiso on Saturday afternoon and played quite well in that game. Clearly outmatched Valpo, but played really, really well, especially on the defensive end, and made shots for a change. Had a big NFL weekend. We'll go to some maybe abbreviated version of winners and losers in the 4 o'clock hour, and of course the college football fix coming up for you in the 5 o'clock hour as well. But hey, Dan, the reason I brought that up is you have this is not new, right? The Hey Dad Christmas party is not something that just started a couple of days ago, and invitations to coaches are not new as well, and you've had coaches that have appeared as well. You've always been very open about the way you cover Mississippi State. And I think it's the reason that our relationship, that this relationship on this show has worked as well as it does, because you have taken a very different approach to being a part of the media. I kind of laughed a little bit when you're like, I'm not a journalist. You said that on your podcast earlier today. But your honesty with fans of Mississippi State is what has endeared you to many of them, probably has driven some of them crazy as well. But I think it's also what has allowed you to have effective working relationships with coaches in all of the sports at Mississippi State.
I don't know. I just try to be me. I don't like to play a character on TV. I mean, you guys have had the conversation. I despise like Skip Bayless and Colin Cowherd, and it's just like you're just playing a character, guys. It's as fake as the wrestling I like to watch. I don't want to be that guy. I just like to talk and when I tell y'all something, I'm telling you what I actually believe at that moment. I've always tried to stick to that. So maybe that honesty, they appreciate that. I don't know. Maybe, deep down also, they know I'm a Bulldog. They know that I'm cheering for them deep inside. So that's maybe that's part of it. Mike Leach and friend would be a stretch because I feel like a friend, I liked Mike Leach. I'm sure he liked me. He knew my name. He knew who I was. I don't know that I was on his Christmas card list or anything like that, but so I feel like I had a good relationship with him. He was somebody that if I wanted him on this show, I could text him and say, hey, can we make it happen? And if we could, he would come on, and if we couldn't, we couldn't. And I feel like I have a similar relationship with Chris Lamonis. I haven't gotten to know Chris Jans as well, or Sam Purcell as well just yet. Vic Schaefer and I had a decent relationship. Ben Hallen and I, decent relationship. So, away from this, though, I'm just another guy, and I have a party. And so if you want to come, you can come. And, Joe Moorhead came one year, and now we had Lamonis, we had Leach. Jake Mangum joined us one year. I mean, we've had some quote celebrity guests, unquote. You could have been one this year if you wanted to show up. We had another Ole Miss fan there. You could have saved him from bearing the brunt of all my jokes. I could have hit you with some of them as well.
Like that goofy-looking sweatshirt you were wearing.
Leach loved the sweatshirt.
Hey, what did the sweatshirt look like last year, bud?
Well, I didn't have one made last year because,
What about the year before that?
I don't. Well, during COVID, the cotton was at a premium.
COVID.
Yeah, I had one the year before that though.
Yes, I remember it. I remember it well. Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. So I like to have those commemorative things done when my side gets the win. And that's the most surreal part of it to me, though, is all of this was. My wife took a picture with him. I have it in my phone, 8:30 p.m. on Saturday. And, 12 hours later, 8:30 in the morning, the man is struggling for his life. That's hard to wrap your head around, I've had people pass away that I'm close to in my life. All of my grandparents are dead. My father passed away 10 years ago. I talked about that on the podcast. But they were all sick. By the time when they died in the hospital. Mike Leach was alive and well and healthy and happy and, BSing with my wife and talking smack about Ole Miss. 12 hours. I mean, before it's difficult for me to wrap my head around what has happened here. I've had a lot of people reach out. And they're like, Brian, we're praying for you. And I appreciate all of those people. Really, I really, truly do. But I'm fine. I'm good. Please, if you're the praying type, give those prayers to Mike Leach and his family and his players and staff. They're the ones who really need them right now. I'm good.
One of the things that has struck me, because Mike Leach has been in the coaching business and in the college football business for a long time, there are a lot of people that have been around him. And while there were times that he could get bristly, he didn't necessarily like pointed questions or second-guessing questions, especially after losses, and would let people know that. He opened himself up in a way that not many coaches do to the media, and it's 3 different major media groups, right? I mean, he was at Texas Tech for a long time, and he was at Washington State for a long time, and he's been at Mississippi State for a shorter amount of time, but 3 years in the college football world is longer than it used to be. And so there are a lot of people that really feel like they know him. And because he's been a major college football coach for nearly a couple of decades, there are a ton of media members who have been around him, either in the television world or the radio world or the print world or the online world. And so it feels like we know Mike Leach in a way that a lot of people don't. One guy that does know him well and will always be linked to him because of the times of their hiring is Lane Kiffin. And I thought what Lane Kiffin said in response to Trey Wallace from Outkick, who had asked for a quote from him, was pretty touching. Truly loved him and every minute I was around him. Can't believe I was just hugging him a few weeks ago. Having coached with his former players and coaches, they always said amazing things about him. I just keep hoping somehow it's not true. I can't picture not having the Pirate around to text and laugh with. We'll look at some of the other responses to Mike Leach, some of the other people that have said things about him, and some of the stories that we've heard about him when we continue with you. Sports Talk Mississippi, streaming at supertalk.fm, SuperTalk TV. Glad to be with you on this Monday afternoon in the Pearl River Resort Studio. If you want to be a part of the conversation, you can join us, as always, on the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. We'll take a short time out, and we'll be back with you after this.
first of all, what powers does a Sun Devil have? We got to consider that. I'm going to say the Wildcat's out. The Trojan, does he have a horse or is he on foot? Does he have a bow and arrow or just his sword? The Bruin, definitely formidable. Another bear up there at Cal. The tree, I imagine that tree's going to get chopped down. Unless we're going to go with the bird and somebody might get pecked or something. I don't know. The duck might lose interest and just fly away and get out of there, which may be good advice under the circumstances. The husky, no chance. The beaver, well, we'll see how long that beaver can hold his breath. The ute, again, we're back to, is he on horseback? Does he have a bow and arrow? Did he trade for a rifle? I mean, because if that ute's got a rifle, there's some definite problems. You'd have to get one of those Harry Potter activists to read up on how you kill a sun devil, because there's a lot of outside stuff there. As far as a beast alone, a buffalo's going to be pretty hard to tangle with. I mean, a buffalo's utterly outstanding. Did I leave any of them out? The Cougar will find a way. Clear-minded and crafty, a combination of stay out of harm's way and attack when you get your chances or your openings.
Did he say you'll have to get one of those Harry Potter activists to figure out how to deal with the Sun Devil?
Yeah. And then I love did I leave one out? Oh, yeah, my own mascot. Yeah. I talked about the rest of them, forgot mine.
Classic Mike Leach. That was when he was at Washington State.
Yeah.
And we did a bit, what was it, on Wednesdays during football season?
Weekly Mike Leach on Wednesday.
We played a clip from a Mike Leach press conference when he was at Washington State on this show every Wednesday during football season, just for the sheer joy of it.
That's what, when you talk about a guy like him, right? There's characters in all things. There's characters in music and Hollywood and all that. There's characters that are just that because that's what they are, and then there's characters with substance. Mike Leach is a character with substance. He's quirky and goofy and said things like that at press conferences. And then, oh, by the way, like we mentioned before, had not just a coaching tree, but an offensive philosophy that changed the sport and the way people approach the offensive side of the ball in the sport. So, yes, there's quirkiness and goofiness and fun and interesting press conferences and stories about how when he was in a team meeting, he took a phone call and talked to the person for an hour, and then after they hang up, the other person in the room's like, who was that? Oh, they had the wrong number. I mean, those things are all him, and also there's substance behind all of that, which makes him so unique in a world in college football where there's a lot of copycatting, and not in a bad way. They say the NFL's a copycat league. Once somebody starts doing this thing on offense, you're going to see other teams do it. But college football is very copycatty. Coaches are quite political in the way they answer questions and handle the media. Everything's all buttoned up and kind of the same across the board. That's not him. He was very himself, and this is my way, and we're going to do it my way, because guess what? My way works. And he took two of the most difficult jobs in college football to heights that are unprecedented by doing it his way, nobody else's way, no change, because I know it works, and I'm going to be myself the entire time. Just such a unique figure in a sport that is filled with cookie cutter. He was anything but that.
There are few people coaching football today whose tentacles reach as far as Mike Leach's, right? So we talk about coaching trees, and when you have a successful coach, a guy like Nick Saban, they are going to have a coaching tree, right? Because when you are extremely successful, people want to take a piece of you and make it theirs. And that's why you've seen so many coordinators that have worked under Nick Saban get the opportunity to be head coaches. Mike Leach does not have Nick Saban level success. Nobody does. But he's been successful and he's been innovative. And he has coached under 3 head coaches. The first was Lyle Sentinick at Cal Poly in 1987. And then he worked at 3 different stops under Hal Mumme. And Hal Mumme and Mike Leach together are credited with the creation of the air raid offense. They were together at Iowa Wesleyan and at Valdosta State and at Kentucky. And he left Kentucky after a couple of years to be the offensive coordinator for Bob Stoops at Oklahoma in 1999, and then he got his head coaching opportunity. Listen to the guys who have coached under Mike Leach. Art Briles, Jeff Choate, who went on to Montana State, Sonny Dykes, who is coaching TCU in the playoffs this year, Greg McMacken, who was a head coach at Hawaii, Ruffin McNeil, who was a head coach at East Carolina, Dana Holgerson, who became a head coach at West Virginia and is now the head coach at Houston, Seth Luttrell, who was until a week ago the head coach at North Texas, Lincoln Riley, perhaps you've heard of him. All he does is coach Heisman Trophy quarterbacks, Ken Wilson at Nevada, Dave Aranda, who's now the head coach at Baylor, was a GA under Mike Leach. So was Sonny Cumbie, who's now the head coach at Louisiana Tech. And then you got players who played under him that have gone on to coach as well, like Cliff Kingsbury and Neil Brown and Seth Luttrell and Josh Heupel and Eric Morris, who is at Incarnate Word, and they put up massive offensive numbers the last couple of years at Incarnate Word, and then Sonny Cumbie, who was both a GA and a player under Mike Leach. So I think I relayed to you, I had a Houston game earlier this season, and in one of the conversations that I had a couple of their games and talked with Dana Holgerson, and I asked him an air raid question because his offenses have evolved. He's like, oh, no, man, they kicked me out of the air raid club a long time ago. He's like, well, you know, we've done a bunch of different stuff with a bunch of different schemes. And I said, but you've still got air raid principles in your passing game concepts, right? He's like, oh, yeah. He's like, you'll never get away from that. He said, it makes all the sense in the world. And then he kind of paused for a second. He's like, man, the only guy who's still running the air raid's a pirate himself. He said, everybody else has adapted it along the way. But Mike Leach, along with Hal Mumme, was the creator of that offense, and he stayed true to it. He believed in it, and he stayed true to it all the way. At times, much to the chagrin of Brian Haydad and others, who thought that the offense needed to evolve a little bit, that there needed to be more run in it. You know, one guy who's not technically in his coaching tree, but should be, is Phil Longo. Phil Longo considers Mike Leach to be a dear friend. When I would interview Phil Longo weekly for the pregame show for Ole Miss games, about every other week we would talk about Mike Leach. And a lot of the time he would bring him up. And he would talk about the weird times that they talked and how he'd be laying in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning and it would be Mike Leach and he'd get out of bed and they'd talk for an hour and a half because those were just the hours that Mike Leach operated on. And he thought that there was a true brilliance. Now, Longo's offense has evolved a bit as well. But when you think about the number of guys who are direct descendants of that tree, and you look across college football and across the NFL, if you really know what you're looking for, and you see conceptually the air raid sprinkled into all of those offenses, you realize just how big of an impact Mike Leach has had on the sport, not just of college football, but of football, period. It's everywhere you look. It's hard to be an innovator in football. It's hard to be an original in football. I mean, you've heard the phrase before, everything that's old becomes new again. And college football is cyclical. People have talked about that in spread offenses, especially with spread option, that it was, it's a variation of a triple option. They're 4 horsemen concepts that are in this. And now RPO. And RPO, the RPO game, in a lot of ways, and hey, Dad, you may be better at X's and O's than I am, but the RPO concept is like a blending of the option and the air raid.
Yeah.
It's about getting guys into space and making defenders make decisions and then taking advantage of what's open based on what the defense does.
I bet if we could talk to Joe Moorhead, that's exactly how he would describe it.
Would describe the RPO game as a blending of triple option and the air raid?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That might be a little awkward because Mike Leach followed Joe Moorhead, but I'm saying, did Joe Moorhead ever, in conversations you have, reference air raid Mike Leach concepts?
Not that I recall, not that I ever asked, but what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
An outpouring of support from all across the college football landscape. One of the more poignant tributes that we have seen comes from the University of Notre Dame. The Notre Dame official Twitter feed a little while ago tweeted lighting a candle and saying a prayer for Coach Leach and the entire Hail State football program. Keep fighting, Coach. And it is a picture of a candle being lit, and it is a Mississippi State candle. Now, I don't know if they just happen to have logoed candles of all colleges hanging around or if somebody in the wax department made that and just popped it. I don't know how that works, but that was a neat tribute from Notre Dame football this afternoon. Hey, Dad, I'm sure Catholic you can appreciate that.
Yeah, that's very cool. Very cool. And like you said, one of dozens of tributes coming around from various programs. Maybe the most touching today is from Texas Tech, the school he left in such an acrimonious nature, but they have put his picture up on their Jumbotron and a tribute to him, saying they're praying for him. That's been on their Jumbotron all day today. So very good to see. When things like this happen, you like to sort of leave the past behind, I think.
Yeah. There's a picture of it from inside the stadium. That's Mike Leach in a Texas Tech coaching pullover with the pirate logo in the background. It says, "Swing your sword. The thoughts and prayers of Red Raider Nation are with Coach Leach and his family." So, yeah, a nice tribute.
I'll never forget that Texas game, Michael Crabtree. I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
Just one of those college football games that, I'm living in South Carolina at the time. I'm a senior in high school. And I had no ties to Texas, no ties to Texas A&M. It couldn't have cared less about the winner or the loser, although I've always kind of rooted for an underdog. And it's just one of those college football games that will forever be imprinted in my head. Michael Crabtree with 2 seconds left, Brent Musburger yelling, fans stormed the field, but they had to kick the ball off, so they had to clear the field to kick the ball off. Unbelievable.
Yeah. And there've been some really that probably is the lasting image of Mike Leach, the football coach, for a lot of people when they think about the moments. But there have been a lot of good moments. Guys, for our sake, it is a good thing that rivalries exist. I think the fact that we have 2 Southeastern Conference schools separated by about 90 miles in a relatively low-populated state is outstanding for us. But we've talked in the past about the fact that we live together, we work together, we worship together, we shop in the same grocery stores, our kids go to the same ball fields. If you live in Starkville, there are Ole Miss fans that live there. If you live in Oxford, there are Mississippi State fans that live there. You kind of roll your eyes when you see the person in Rebel gear in Starkville or Bulldog gear in Oxford. I mean, it just happens. And yet,
I absolutely do.
You know what I'm talking about.
I'm telling you, if I'm driving down the road, prior to Thanksgiving, when I would drive down the road and see an Ole Miss tag, I would just be like, oh. And now it's like, ha. So it changes with the victories and the losses.
I had to get on an airplane Friday morning after the Egg Bowl on Thursday night. And where was I? I was going to Philadelphia. And so I was on the 6 a.m. flight or 6:30 flight, whatever it was, out of Memphis that connects in Charlotte. And hey, Dad, doggone it, if the first thing I saw when I got off the plane in Charlotte was a Mississippi State fan that, had his golf shirt or T-shirt or pullover. Or I mean, it was like, you didn't even have time to go to the closet and get that out. But, I mean, the second that Mississippi State wins that game, you started. It's like,
he knew you were coming.
Where did all this stuff come from? The larger point that I was going to make in all of that was it doesn't happen often, thankfully, because it usually takes some form of sadness or tragedy or natural disaster to see multiple fan bases come together. But I think we are reminded of the relationships that we have as people when rival fan bases kind of set down their colors or at least become a little less obnoxious with them for a short amount of time when something like this pops up. And I'm not going to tell you who's in it, but I have a group text message. Hey, Dad, I know you've got a bunch of group text messages. I don't have nearly as many. I don't like group text messages. But the name of the group text message is Billy Brewer Fan Club. And, going back to yesterday afternoon, every text in that group is about Mike Leach. We need to pray for the Pirate. Hate to hear that. He's been one of my favorites to follow long before he was at Mississippi State. Just kind of on and on like that. And I have to believe that exists all throughout the state of Mississippi today. Among Ole Miss fans and Southern Miss fans and Mississippi State fans and LSU fans and Auburn fans and Alabama fans and Arkansas fans. We got an Arkansas fan texting in just a little while ago. And it does truly feel like everyone has come together to offer their best to Mike Leach and to his family and to the Mississippi State family in this difficult time. Sports Talk Mississippi, 4 o'clock. And if you want speculation, it's out there. There's plenty of it. What we do know, though, is that Mike Leach is in critical condition. He has some of the best doctors and caregivers that the state of Mississippi has to offer at UMMC, and his family is surrounding him. So there are people that are closer to this situation that will tell you that the end is inevitable. And that may very well be the case. But we're just going to kind of hold off until we get to that point. If that point arrives, then at that point, we will eulogize Mike Leach. We will talk about what he has meant from a football standpoint, what he's meant to college football at large. And instead, for now, we're talking about Mike Leach without question. But we're kind of trying to talk about the man that he was, the football coach that he was, and all of those things. And hey, Dad, this feels out of place, but it's not. Because even when we go through difficult situations, the world doesn't stop, right? Everything else continues to happen even when our minds kind of freeze because we're having to deal with something that's uncomfortable or difficult or sad. And so there is a practical football piece to this as well. Mississippi State is in the middle of its bowl preparation. This would have been a practice week, kind of going toward the end of the week. And my assumption, and I haven't seen Mississippi State's entire schedule, but my assumption is that players would be going home around the 20th or the 21st or the 22nd. They would be able to go home for Christmas and then would reconvene in Tampa for the Outback Bowl. So there is certainly time for whatever football decisions have to be made. But Mississippi State let it be known through Sid Salter yesterday that during this interim time, whatever it may be, Zach Arnett, the defensive coordinator, is running the program, handling bowl preparations and recruiting operations. And that's still happening. That doesn't stop just because our focus is elsewhere.
They had official visitors on campus this past weekend, and have official visitors coming in this weekend. A lot of you guys coming in this weekend are portal guys, and I don't know how you recruit in this situation, especially when you consider Mississippi State doesn't have an athletic director right now. So even if they wanted to begin the search for a new permanent football coach, they don't have the pieces in place to do that. And we talk about that on tomorrow's Thunder and Lightning podcast to a degree, because it feels like to me, and it's just my opinion, that if I'm Dr. Keenum, who I believe is in Jackson right now with Coach Leach, the idea might be you need to expedite the process. I think the betting
athletics
favorite
director search
on the athletic director side, yeah, because I think that everybody was kind of leaning towards hiring Jared Benko, the Georgia Southern athletic director. He's been the favorite in conversations I've had. Maybe you go ahead and pull the trigger on that to get somebody in place. I feel like he's a good, quality, competent candidate. But regardless of who you choose, maybe you go ahead and try to get them in place now so that you can put together a search. Some friends of mine were talking about this yesterday, and they were just like, so what do? You just go ahead and promote Arnett? And I said, when you look back, they let Joe Moorhead go on January 3rd. So, almost a full month from now. So you still have time, if you have to do a coaching search, to do that, if you can get your athletic director in place. If you don't, and it drags out, then you probably put yourself in the position where you just name Zach Arnett the head coach, and you sort of see what happens next year. You name him the head coach, but maybe you just tell him, this is sort of an audition. We'll see how this year goes. I don't know how that works, though. I don't know. That's a dangerous situation. You got to have some stability to recruit. So this is going to be a real test of this staff and how they handle things over the next few weeks, trying to keep recruits. National Signing Day is 9 days away. How do you keep your class together? How do you keep people? How do you get visitors in? What are you selling them on? It's gonna be a different look at Mississippi State next year, in all likelihood. So
there's no real precedent for something like this. So
there is no playbook for this.
It happened. I remembered this name, Randy Walker, who Pat Fitzgerald actually replaced when he passed in the summer of 2006. And Fitzgerald just seamlessly took over and was the guy ever since. But that was in the summer, and that was not in this era of player movement and things like that. It just the conversations are different because anybody seemingly can just kind of up and go as they please just for whatever reason and when they want to. It makes all of those conversations so much different than they would have been just a few years ago and since all the way back in 2006.
And you mentioned Joe Moorhead being hired on or being let go on January 3rd, and then the search following that. And so it was mid-January when Mike Leach ultimately was hired. And that's not ideal, but even that short period of time ago, the recruiting calendar was different than it is now, right?
Well, they had had the early signing day prior to Moorhead's dismissal. Mississippi State, immediately came out and said, any recruits who want to be let out of their NIL, we will let them. It's weird to say NIL, by the way, or NLI, not NIL. You got to keep those straight nowadays. Yeah. But anyway, the state only had one taker on that. One player decided to get out. Everybody else stayed. That's the class that brought in Will Rogers and Dylan Johnson and Jaquavius Marks and a lot of the top contributors for this team. So.
Lots of questions, right? Patience is fleeting for all of us. And what does everybody want? They want answers, right? You want an answer on Mike Leach's condition. You want an answer on, exactly what happened with Mike Leach. You want an answer on who's the head coach going to be. What's bowl practice? And the reality is right now, there are way more questions than there are answers. And that is not a comfortable place for any of us to live, right? That's not the way we operate in any facet of our lives. We need answers. We don't have answers right now. And it's going to be like that for a little while. Sports Talk circle back or revisit the news of the day. And that is the condition of Mike Leach, which is still listed at critical. He is at UMMC in Jackson. According to the most recent release from Mississippi State, which was at 10:45 this morning, Mississippi State's Mike Leach remains in critical condition at the University of Mississippi Medical Center in Jackson. His family is with him, and he appreciates the overwhelming expressions of love and support, but also requests that their family's privacy be respected at this time. This is the extent of information that Mississippi State has available regarding Coach Leach's condition. The university will make no other comment, but will additional information via social media when it becomes available. And again, that was at 10:38 this morning. There has been an outpouring of support, of well wishes, of thoughts, of prayers, of memorials, all different kinds of touching tributes to Mike Leach that have come from all over the state of Mississippi and have come from all over the country and all over the college football world. And guys, it's one of the things that we talked about early in the show today. If you're being a little insular or a little myopic, then you only think about Mike Leach, the head coach of Mississippi State, where he's been for the last 3 years, and what it means for your program, what it means for our program, however you're looking at it. But the truth is, the reach of Mike Leach in college football is far, and it's wide, and it's deep, and it's been going for a long time. You know, since the late 80s when he first got into coaching and worked through the late 90s as an assistant coach. Father of the air raid offense alongside Hal Mumme. And then into his coaching tenure at Texas Tech and Washington State and Mississippi State. I mean, just at a very surface level, that is 3 distinct geographic regions of the United States. The state of Texas, West Texas no less, the Pacific Northwest, and the Deep South. 3 very distinct locations where you had different media groups, different recruiting bases, different high school coaching bases, different networks covering the conferences, radio people, television people, print people, online people, the network of people that have interacted with Mike Leach since, 1990 it's incalculable. And almost everybody that has come into contact with him in one way or another left with an opinion. And more times than not, the opinion was, that guy's different. That guy's interesting. That guy knows football. But he's different and he's interesting and he's quirky and he's unique and a unicorn in a lot of ways. Truly a unique individual in the college football world that is filled with a lot of people that are round pegs, round holes, square pegs, square holes, and nothing else. He is unique.
And at 3 different stops that I think every fan base, if they were to listen, would agree, traditionally difficult places to win. Very little history of success at Washington. They went to a Rose Bowl once at Washington State, at least I think in my lifetime. But as far as I can remember,
Ryan Leaf is the quarterback.
Yeah, but as far as I can remember, Washington State has been a doormat, and then Mike Leach shows up. Texas Tech, before Mike Leach showed up, and I was young, and after he left, guess what they have been? A doormat. And then in 3 years, dealing with the COVID year in year 1, Mike Leach takes Mississippi State to 8 wins in the Outback Bowl. I mean, just 3. I like the way you put that, too, the different geographical places. How often do people talk about, you want to coach with ties? Well, the selling point for a coach is, he's got Southern ties. Coached high school ball in Florida, worked under Saban's staff at Alabama. That's a selling point for these guys. Now, Mike Leach spent time in the SEC a couple decades ago. But still, no ties to these places, generally speaking, and just one at an unprecedented level at each place. It's the character is unique. The body of work is unique also.
Thanks to his win in the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night, that has allowed Brian Haydad to have custom sweatshirts made and to have a perpetual smile on his face since late November. Mike Leach has a winning record at all three of his head coaching stops. 84 and 43 at Texas Tech from 2000 until 2009.
That is remarkable at a place like that. I mean, that is a hard place to win. Beautiful campus at Texas Tech. The area around the campus is barren and terrible.
Winning record every single season at Texas Tech.
It's just hard. And that's so hard. I mean, Cliff King, the Cardinals coach, couldn't do that with Patrick Mahomes on his team.
Washington State, winning record, 55 and 47. He was there from 2012 until 2019. And in his 3 seasons at Starkville, again, thanks to the win on Thanksgiving night, 19 and 17, 2 games above 500. And, hey, Dad, you pointed something out on your podcast last night. And it's sobering to say it out loud. And I don't think you were taking any liberties. The question for Mike Leach is not, will he coach again? The question is, can he hang on to life?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot more important right now when we think about Coach Leach to not think about him back on the sidelines, but just to think about him back at home with his wife, with his children, his grandchildren, and things of that nature. That's the life that Coach Leach is going to lead if he is able to pull out of this. The idea of him coaching anytime soon. I will say this: regardless of what happens in the next 24 to 48 hours with Mike Leach, Mississippi State will not be coached by Mike Leach next season. That's just not going to happen. So put that out of your mind if you're thinking it. I don't know if it'll be Zach Arnett. I don't know who it'll be, but it will not be Mike Leach. So right now, when you say you hope for the best for Mike Leach, what you're hoping for is that he survives this and is able to live out his days.
And again, we have tried to be very careful today not to speculate at all. There's plenty of that available if you want it in various social media channels and websites. The people that have covered this story have, I think, been as candid and as honest as they feel they can be without violating any family wishes, in letting you know that the situation is extremely critical. And that continues to be the case. And beyond that, we do not have an official word from Mississippi State or Mike Leach's family on his condition as we speak right now. But as the family has asked for, and as the Mississippi State community has continually asked for, prayers are needed for peace as much as anything right now. Sports Talk Mississippi. On the C Spire text line at 601-879-4395. We will unfortunately not get to see what he could have done, talking about Mike Leach at Mississippi State. I know it's not important to what's going on, but it felt like things were headed in the right direction. Here's one Rebel fan here. So glad that Mike Leach won the Egg Bowl. I once saw Coach Leach outside M.M. Roberts Stadium, The Rock, in Hattiesburg, when he was doing broadcasting between Texas Tech and Washington State, in between those two jobs. He was in the booth as well. Yeah, he was unique as an announcer in that role. He and Jack Arute had a radio show on Sirius XM that was. Yeah. Look.
It's different.
If you've laughed and joked along with us about the incessant coughing during his press conferences and clearing his throat, that was nothing new. I know there are people that have said, oh, you should have known something was wrong with him because you've heard him cough all this season. No, that was not new. That was a constant during that radio show the couple of years that they were there together. That was two guys together that told some stories on the radio in that interim period for Mike Leach between being the head coach at Texas Tech and being the head coach at Washington State.
I was asked about this earlier today. I was on 365 radio out in Texas. They asked me for my favorite Mike Leach story. I will now share it here on Sports Talk Mississippi.
Please do.
So I was invited to a dinner a few years ago. It's an annual dinner that I get invited to. Usually it's just some media folks and some friends, and we get together, have a good time. But for this one, they invited some Mississippi State people, and Coach Leach was one of them. And I was sitting right next to him at the dinner table. We're just talking and BSing. And I had my phone just up on the table. You know, I will admit that thing is part of my hand at this point. I like to keep up. I always fear, even with him sitting next to me, I'm always like, what if he gets fired? I need to know. Yeah, so I'm just sitting there eating dinner, and I look at my phone is lit up, and it's my mom. And I couldn't resist. I was like, hey, Coach, you want to talk to my mom? And he just looks at me and goes, absolutely. Picks up the phone, swipes over. You got Coach Mike Leach here. How you doing? And he had her on the phone for a good 10 minutes. Oh, your son's hilarious. Funny guy. I like him a lot. And so I'm just sitting there. And so then he's like, all right, well, you take care. It's good to talk to you. Hands me the phone. And I can feel my mom blushing through the phone. She's like, Brian, hey, Dad, don't you ever was that really Mike Leach? And I was like, yes, ma'am, that was Mike Leach you were just talking to. Well, I didn't know I was going to be talking to him. And my mom was all jazzed up about it. It was hilarious. I thought he was really funny. So Mike Leach talked to my mom.
That's pretty good stuff.
That's my story.
Mike Leach, willing to talk and funny. That's new.
Yeah.
So, how long ago was it? Was it a year or so ago when he was on with us, and we kind of had this constant intern? Maybe it was 2 years ago. But Haydad and I went back and forth because Brian Haydad, I mean, you guys have listened to him for a long time. Brian Haydad, when he gets a head football coach on, he wants to talk football. He wants to talk X's and O's. He wants to talk depth chart. And I was like,
Richard Cross is a humanist. He is a man of knowledge and wealth and taste. He wants to go deeper.
I want to be entertained, especially by somebody like that, and I want to try and present entertainment for our listeners. And so we kind of walked the line on that. And Haydad asked some football questions, and I asked some less than football questions. And we talked about his journey, and he gave us every town that he had lived in over the course of 60 years.
Which was an impressive list, by the way,
including Finland.
Yeah, and it took a while, but then I asked him kind of innocuously. I was like, Key West. There's a lot of Ernest Hemingway history there. Did you have interest in Ernest Hemingway? And that is when he launched into what was an incredible 5 or 6 minutes of radio where he talked about Ernest Hemingway in Key West and Cuba and visiting Cuba, and it was remarkable.
I remember how mad the text line was because he talked right into a break, and I recorded. So, little inside baseball for all of you out there. Because of our syndication, it's a good problem to have. I can't control when commercial breaks start. They start, and it's not up to me. It's not my fault. If a good conversation comes to an end, it is not up to me. We've got clocks and all that stuff. So I remember the text line because he talked right into that break, and luckily I was recording him because he kept going almost entirely through the entire break. And our text line was like, what happened? And we got to play it after we came back. Quick thinking on my part, not to pat myself on the back or anything, but I remember that. He talked 5 minutes into that break, too.
Yeah.
It was the best.
It was incredible. And we came back. I was like, okay, I apologize. Yes, I know Mike Leach was still talking when we went to a break. Here's the rest of what he said. And Borky hit play, and it was right there for it. But, I mean, it's not like we were going to interrupt him on the story. Just let him talk, and we'll give it to you when we get back.
Let the man rip. Yeah.
It really has been neat is such an insignificant word to use in this situation. But it's been really incredible to watch the outpouring of support that has come from all over the United States toward Mike Leach and his family. And I think maybe the word or the phrase that has been used more than any that I've seen has been national treasure. People have over and over and over said this guy is a national treasure, not just for football, but for life. And I was talking with somebody last night, and he said, you think about football coaches and how hard they work, and they make a lot of money, and it's in their blood, and they want it. He's like, but, man, just wonder if some of those guys should get out sooner and enjoy life. I said to him, you know what, I agree with that, but I think Mike Leach may have been the rare exception to the rule. He loved football, and that was a big part of his life. But he didn't let that be the only thing in his life. And I don't know if it was perspective post-Texas A&M when he got the house in Key West and spent a lot of time down there. But there were so many other interests and curiosities that existed for Mike Leach, and he explored those things fully. I mean, traveling to different parts of the world.
He is the living, breathing definition of a Renaissance man.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm asking a rhetorical question. Is there another football coach that was as willing to talk about as many different topics as Mike Leach? Clearly, the answer is no.
I mean, could you imagine asking any other football coach the questions that Leach gets asked and answers with thought?
No. Politics, current events, news, history, wars.
And it's organic. He's not trying. And you know when somebody's trying to be funny. You know when somebody's trying to be entertaining versus when somebody is funny and entertaining. Those clips, that's just who he is. That's not him trying to be funny about weddings. Alyssa Lang asked him about weddings, so he told her what he thought. It's just that simple.
Michael Borky has been playing.
Funny moment.
Go ahead.
I had a funny moment with him on Saturday night when I introduced my wife to him, and he's like, "Good to see you again." And I was just like, "Oh God, he doesn't know her. He's just trying to." And then I remembered he did know her because she brought him cookies last year after he talked about how he liked Almond Joys, and I texted him. I was like, "My wife makes Almond Joy cookies. Would you like some?" And he was like, "Absolutely, bring me them." And so she went to Dog Talk, which they hold at the Greater Starkville Development Partnership, where we've done a couple of remotes. And I remember her texting me at like 7:03. She's like, "He's not here yet." I was like, "Yeah, that sounds about right. Just sit around. He'll show up eventually." And he did. And she gave him the cookies. And then right after the show ends, I'm at a restaurant eating dinner with a friend, and my phone lights up. It's Mike Leach. "Brian, these cookies are outstanding. I may have already eaten 6 of them. I'm not saying that for sure, though." It's like, I'm glad you liked them, Coach.
Michael Borky has played some Mike Leach clips for you throughout the course of the show this afternoon. We'll see if we can dig up another one of those when we come back.
Yeah, we'll
Sports
do
Talk
the
Mississippi
cameo that he had on the show Friday Night Lights. That's what we'll do.
He was a lot of things. A great actor? Not necessarily one of them.
You got to take 61 up to 23.
Hey, Dylan East, right? You're the coach at Dylan East. You've lost your inner pirate. Sword. Have you ever heard swing your sword? You're supposed to swing your sword like this. You're swinging yours like this. I mean, you've got to find your inner pirate. A lot of times things just happen for a reason. We don't know why God wants it that way, but you can't make the best out of it until you get back your inner pirate. You might be the luckiest man alive and not even know it.
Friday Night Lights, Mike Leach, cameo.
How about that last line, though? It's a goofy appearance where he's talking about how you need to swing your sword up here like this, and he's essentially waving, and you're swinging it like this, like he's doing one half of an incomplete pass motion, and then drops an incredibly profound line right there at the end before he gets in his truck and drives away.
You might be the luckiest guy in the world, and you don't even know it.
Yeah.
It's very Mike Leach to do, though, to just be in the middle of the wackiest thing you ever heard and then just drop some Socrates-level philosophy on you.
I'm sure you guys watched the clip in addition to hearing it right there. Maybe the worst acting in the history of television.
I mean, the man's not an actor. He's doing the best he could.
Oh, it was good. It was good. Skip and Pearl, from an Ole Miss fan, this has been one of the best shows I've heard you guys do. Laughter, tears, then more laughter. Much respect and prayers for the Leach family. Hail State. That's from Skip. Thank you, Skip. Mike says, when Nutt was fired, my office mate advocated for Leach at Ole Miss by hanging a pirate flag out the window until the university made us take it down.
What a great brand, too. Just remember when John Cohen hired him? Tweeted a video of Pirates of the Caribbean, and everybody knew who he was talking about. I mean, what a great brand that is. The Pirate. I mean, one of the better nicknames in sports.
A lot of sword-handled cowbells around the state. I promise you that.
Oh yeah, those look really cool.
We get this that says, I wish that they would have kept up the coaches' roundtable at the Neshoba County Fair. Leach and Kiffin at the same venue was great.
Oh, that was really good.
It was.
And Will Hall sitting over there like, I'm just going to let these guys go.
Kyle reminds us, we talked about this a little bit earlier today, that Raymond James Stadium, where Mississippi State will play in its bowl game, has a pirate ship in the end zone. It is true.
Last